Welcome back, guys. You're listening to PlanetInside Series 1, Episode 3. I'm your host, Luke Gagan. So this week we're going to kick off the show by heading over to phantomsandmonsters.com, where I've got an incredibly creepy story where a family encounter some sort of strange bipedal creature that stalks their family. So the Martin family had downsized their lives. A workplace injury had devastated Eric, and Shelley had left their job to take care of her husband. As a result, they were looking for a less expensive place to live. Shelley had found a beautiful older farm in Pamra that was just what they needed. It was surrounded by dense woods. Eric's family had always been hunters, and his fairly extensive collection of guns was a bone of contention with Shelley. With the help of Eric's son Sean, Eric built a strongbox to hold the guns under lock and key in the barn. Eric and Shelley had a routine of evening coffee on the sheltered porch, providing it wasn't too cold. One night, they noticed strange, pulsating lights down past the tree line. At first, Sean thought it was just a poacher with a flashlight, but something didn't seem right. Shelley thought it was unnatural. So Eric and Sean headed out into the field to investigate. As they approached the woods, the lights went out. It was so quiet, the snap of a tree branch underfoot echoed. Eric sent Sean around with his flashlight off, hoping to catch any potential poacher unaware. But Eric felt something far beyond any fear he'd ever felt hunting. All Eric and Sean found was each other, not even a track on the ground to give them a hint of what they'd seen. Chelsea's boyfriend Nathan came for a visit, and they decided to go for a walk in the woods with the dogs. The dogs ran out ahead of them, catching a scent. When Chelsea and Nathan caught up, the dogs were rooting around by a large hole in the ground. Nathan thought the overly round hole had been dug with care. Chelsea had a bad feeling about the whole thing and urged him to leave. Finally he agreed. What had the dogs found? It was Memorial Day weekend, and Shelley was making the evening coffee. The dogs didn't want to go outside to their pen. Something wasn't right. Eric noticed that it was particularly quiet on that misty evening. When Eric heard an odd sound in the distance, he knew there was some sort of danger out there. Eric began to usher Shelley into the house. She protested, but when she heard some rustling in the distance, accompanied by 5 sets of eyes looking back at them, she realized the danger. They rushed into the house and locked the door. Eric knew it wasn't a bear, but it was huge and dangerous. The guns were in the barn, and Eric wasn't sure his family was safe in the house. Eric wanted to get the guns, but Shelley told him to stay. She went up to Chelsea's room and woke her daughter. Chelsea was half awake when she looked out the window, but laid back down and went back to sleep. All 5 of the creatures were still there. One stood on its hind legs and looked right back at Shelley. Eric felt an instinct to protect his family. With the creatures in the distance, he thought that he might be able to get the family car backed up close enough to get them out. Even with his disability, Eric went outside. Shelley went through the house, closing the windows. She finally found the 2 hunting dogs hiding in a shadowed corner. If the dogs were scared, there must be something wrong. Shelley was concerned. When Eric reached the porch, he realized that he might have the distance to get there. It was going to be the longest 20 feet of his life. He started to slowly walk towards the car. When he finally reached it, grabbing the keys and trying to unlock the door, the motion sensor lights popped on. Eric was frightened and very vulnerable. Suddenly, he was face to face with one of the creatures. It tried to reach into the light, but something stopped it. It bolted off into the darkness. Eric made for the house as quickly as he could. They decided to call the police, hoping for someone else to drive in while they remained sheltered in the house. The police didn't take them seriously, telling Shelley to close the windows and lock the doors. Nobody was coming. They were on their own. Shelley set up a view from Chelsea's window. She could see the whole farm from there. Eric was downstairs, frustrated and upset. Then it occurred to him that the creatures were either afraid or hurt by the light. That had to be why they didn't attack him. He made the decision to use the light to get out to the barn and fetch a gun. He went out and flailed his arms in a desperate attempt to trigger the motion sensor. When the light came on, Eric realized that the eyes were staring back at him, surrounding him. Eric was being hunted. He had to get back into the house. He got back as quickly as he could, barely making it before the light went out. Shelley heard them approach. They were on the other side of the outside wall, and if they wanted in, they were going to get in. Her family was being held hostage in their own house by these creatures. They weren't able to get the guns, there weren't any police coming. What were they going to do? Grabbing every sharp implement they could find, Shelley went and woke Chelsea. They needed all hands awake and alert. They all went into the master bedroom and laid on top of the bed, armed, waiting on daylight to come. When they heard the creatures outside, they were petrified. The only thing between the Martins and the creatures was the bedroom window. When morning came, they could finally breathe a sigh of relief. The creatures were gone. Eric called Sean, who came over and helped look for tracks. The tracks they did find were huge, with enormous claws. They showed a creature who could walk on 2 feet. These creatures had been hunting, stalking. Were they werewolves? To this day, nobody knows. Well guys, I don't know what these monsters could be, and I'm gonna leave that down to your imaginations, but the family have speculated the possibilities of what the lights could have been, what the creatures could have been, and they've systematically debunked all kinds of theories, from it being hunters to a prank, all kinds of possibilities. Is it linked with UFOs maybe? Maybe that would explain the bright lights before they saw the creatures. I know from other eyewitness statements that claim they saw Bigfoot, they often describe seeing very bright lights in the surrounding area. I don't know. Could they be dreaming? Could they be making it up? I mean, for the whole family to be a witness to these incidents, I would hate to say possible mass hysteria, or whether something actually paranormal or just funky is occurring on their farm. I honestly don't know. What was suspicious about this particular story was the fact that there is no real evidence. She said that she had taken photos of the prints that were left in the mud, but she ended up getting her phone changed or something, so she lost the pictures. And I just feel like if something like this was to happen to you, you would be very careful with what you did with the evidence, and if you had something as concrete as photo evidence, you're not going to lose that very easily. So guys, let me know what you think. Head over to planetinside.co.uk and leave your comments, or you can email me at lukgoh@hotmail.co.uk. But I would love to hear your thoughts, and maybe we can have an open discussion on the website. Anyway, we're going to take a quick music break right now, but don't go anywhere. We'll be back soon.
And I told you to be patient, and I told you to be fine, and I told you to be balanced, and I told you to be kind. Now on and I'll be with you, but it will be a different kind. But I'll be holding all the tickets, you'll be holding all the fines. Come on, skinny love, what happened here? Sucking along the hope and life is here. My, Son of the Lord is full, so storm is here. And I told you to be patient, and I told you to be kind, and I told you to be balanced, and I told you to be fine. Now all your love is wasted, then who the hell was I? Now I'm breaking out the bridges at the end of all your lines. Come on, skinny love, what happened here? Yeah, suckle on the hope we were never here. Mama, my, mama, my, mama.
Next up, I want to start a new series where I'm going to share one of my favorite topics with you guys, which is Norse mythology, and they have some really great stories. So I've decided that each episode I'm going to share one story with you, and there's no better place to start than right at the beginning. Bear with me on some of the pronunciation. Some of the names are very, very difficult to pronounce, but here goes. Before the beginning there was nothing. No earth, no heavens, no stars, no sky. Only the mist world, formless and shapeless, and the fire world, always burning. To the north was Niflheim, the dark world. Here 11 poisonous rivers cut through the mist, each springing from the same well at the centre of it all. The roaring maelstrom called Hevergilmer. Niflheim was colder than cold, and the murky mist that cloaked everything hung heavily. The skies were hidden by mist, and the ground was clouded by the chilly fog. To the south was Muspel. Muspel was fire. Everything there glowed and burned. Muspel was light, where Niflheim was grey, molten lava, where the mist world was frozen. The land was aflame with the roaring heat of a blacksmith's fire. There was no solid earth, no sky. Nothing but sparks and spurting heat, molten rocks and burning embers. In Muspel, at the edge of the flame, where the mist burns into light, where the land ends, stood Surtur, who existed before the gods. He stands there now. He holds a flaming sword, and the bubbling lava and the freezing mist are as one to him. It is said that at Ragnarok, which is at the end of the world, and only then, Surtur will leave his station. He will go forth from Muspel with his flaming sword and burn the world with fire, and one by one the gods will fall before him. Between Muspel and Niflheim was a void, an empty place of nothingness, without form. The rivers of the Mistworld flowed into the void, which was called Ginnungagap, the yawning gap. Over time, beyond measure, these poisoned rivers in the region between fire and mist slowly solidified into huge glaciers. The ice in the north of the void was covered in frozen fog and pellets of hail, but to the south, where the glaciers reached the land of fire, the embers and the sparks from Muspel met the ice, and warm winds from the flamelands made the air above the ice as gentle and as comfortable as a spring day. Where the ice and the fire met, the ice melted, and in the melting waters life appeared. The likeliness of a person bigger than worlds, hunger than any giant there will be or has ever been. This was neither male nor was it female, but was both at the same time. This creature was the ancestor of all giants, and it called itself Mer. Mer was not the only living thing to be formed by the melting of the ice. There was also a hornless cow, more enormous than the mind could hold. She licked the salty blocks of ice for food and for drink, and the milk that ran from her 4 udders flowed like rivers. It was this milk that nourished Mer. The giant drank the milk and grew. Mer called the cow Odhumla. The cow's pink tongue licked people from the blocks of ice. The first day only a man's hair, the second his head, and the third day the shape of a whole man was revealed. This was Buri, the ancestor of the gods. Mer slept, and while it slept, it gave birth. A male and a female giant were born from beneath Mer's left arm. A 6-headed giant born from its legs. From these Mer's children, all giants are descended. Buri took a wife from among these giants, and they had a son, whom they called Bor. Bor married Besla, daughter of a giant, and together they had 3 sons, Odin, Vili, and Vi. Odin and Vili and Vi, the 3 sons of Bor, grew into manhood. They saw as they grew far off the flames of Muspel and the darkness of Niflheim, but they knew that each place would be death to them. The brothers were trapped forever in Ginnungagap, the vast gap between the fire and the mist. They might as well have been nowhere. There was no sea and no sand, no grass nor rocks, no soil, no trees, no sky, no stars. There was no world, no heaven and no earth at that time. The gap was nowhere, only an empty place waiting to be filled with life and with existence. It was time for the creation of everything. Vi and Vili and Odin looked at each other and spoke of what was needful to do, there in the void of Ginnungagap. They spoke of the universe and of life and of the future. Odin, Vili and Vi killed the giant Mer. It had to be done. There was no other way to make the worlds. This was the beginning of all things, the death that made all life possible. They stabbed the great giant. Blood gushed out from Mer's corpse in unimaginable quantities. Fountains of blood as salt as the sea and grey as the oceans gushed out in a flood so sudden, so powerful, and so deep that it swept away and drowned all the giants. Only one giant, Belgamer, Mer's grandson, and his wife survived, by clambering onto a wooden box which bore them like a boat. All the giants we see and we fear today are descended from them. Odin and his brother made the soil from Mer's flesh. Mer's bones they piled up into mountains and cliffs. Our rocks and pebbles, the sand and gravel you see, these are Mer's teeth, and the fragments of bones that were broken and crushed by Odin and Vili and V in their battle with Mer. The seas that girdle the worlds, these were Mer's blood and his sweat. Look up into the sky, you are looking at the inside of Mer's skull. The stars you see at night, the planets, all the comets and the shooting stars, these are the sparks that flew from the fires of Muspel. And the clouds you see by day, these were once Mer's brains, and who knows what thoughts they are thinking, even now. The world is a flat disk, and the sea encircles the perimeter. Giants live at the edges of the world, besides the deepest seas. To keep the giants at bay, Odin and Vili and V made a wall from Mer's eyelashes and set it around the middle of the world. They called the place within the wall Midgard. Midgard was empty. The lands were beautiful, but nobody walked the meadows or fished in the clear waters. Nobody explored the rocky mountains or stared up at the clouds. Odin and Vili and V knew that a world is not a world until it is inhabited. They wandered high and low, looking for people, and they found nothing. At last, on the rocky shingle at the edge of the sea, they found 2 logs, sea-tossed, that had floated there on the tides and been cast ashore. The first log was a log of ash wood. The ash tree is resilient and handsome, and its roots go deep. Its wood carves well, and will not split or crack. Ash wood makes a good tool handle, or the shaft of a spear. The second log they found beside the first on the beach, so close to the first log they were almost touching, was a log of elm wood. The elm tree is graceful, but its wood is hard enough to be made into the toughest planks and beams. You can build a fine home or a hall from elm wood. The gods took the 2 logs. They set the logs so they were upright in the sand, the height of people. Odin held them, and one by one he breathed life into them. No longer were they dead logs on a beach. Now they were alive. Vili gave them will. He gave them intelligence and drive. Now they could move, and they could want. V carved the logs. He gave them the shape of people. He carved their ears, that they might hear, and their eyes, that they might see, and lips, that they might speak. The 2 logs stood on the beach, 2 naked people. V had carved one with male genitals, the other he had carved female. The 3 brothers made clothes for the woman and the man, to cover themselves and to keep them warm in the chilly sea spray on the beach at the edge of the world. Last of all they gave the 2 people they had made names. The man they called Ask, or Ash Tree. The woman they called Embla, or Elm. Ask and Embla were the father and mother of all of us. Every human being owes its life to its parents and their parents before them. Go far enough back, and the ancestors of each of us were Ask and Embla. Embla and Ask stayed in Midgard, safe behind the wall the gods had made from Mer's eyelashes. In Midgard they would make their homes, protected from giants and monsters and all the dangers that wait in the wastes. In Midgard they could raise their children in peace. That is why Odin is called the All-Father, because he was the father of the gods, and because he breathed the breath of life into our grandparents, grandparents, grandparents. Whether we are gods or mortals, Odin is the father of us all. It definitely sounds bizarre, and you have to give it to the ancient Norsemen. They certainly do have an imagination. But is it just an imagination? Their belief system, their creation story has some very spooky similarities between a lot of the world's creation stories. And if there's some truth in others, then there must be some truth in theirs as well. And it'd be interesting to really find out where these beliefs came from. If you go back to the earliest civilization and their belief system or their creation story, it sounds very familiar, where the gods tried to create man out of many different things and failed until eventually they created human beings. I genuinely love listening to these stories, whether there's any actual truth in them or whether it's just craziness, I don't know, but they are very entertaining to listen to. So I hope you enjoyed it, and make sure you listen out for next week's story. So we're going to take another music break right here, and then we're going to move on to our final story. Don't go anywhere.
I dive into frozen waves where the past comes back to life. Fight fear for the selfish pain, it was worth it every time. Hold still right before we crash, 'cause we both know how this ends. A clock ticks till it breaks your glass, and I drown in you again. 'Cause you are the piece of me I wish I didn't need. Chasing relentlessly, still fight, and I don't know why. If our love is tragedy, why are you my remedy? If our love's insanity, why are you my clarity? By now that I wanna learn not to play with fire. If I don't wanna be burned by fire, lady, I hear your favorite flaws, guess you're burning higher. I'm starting this wildfire.
Our final story is a strange one indeed. It is the 5-year-old mum, Lina Medina. This is back in 1939. Lina Medina was born on the 23rd of September 1933. She's a Peruvian woman who became the youngest confirmed mother in medical history, giving birth at the age of 5 years, 7 months and 21 days. She lives in Lima, the capital of Peru. She was brought to a hospital by her parents at the age of 5 years due to increasing abdominal size. She was originally thought to have a tumour, but doctors determined she was in her 7th month of pregnancy. Dr. Gazardo Lazada took Medina to Lima to have other specialists confirm that she was pregnant. A month and a half after the original diagnosis, Medina gave birth by a C-section to a boy. She was 5 years, 7 months and 21 days old, the youngest known person in history to give birth. The caesarean birth was necessitated by a small pelvis. The surgery was performed by Lazada and Dr. Buscella, with Dr. Clarta providing anesthesia. When doctors performed the C-section to deliver her baby, they found she had already fully matured sexual organs from a precocious puberty. Her case was reported in detail by Dr. Edmundo Escamel, including additional details that contrasted the earlier belief that she'd been having regular periods since she was 3 years old. The report also detailed that she had prominent breast development by the age of 4. By age 5, her figure displayed pelvic widening and advanced bone maturation. Medina's son weighed 2.7 kilograms, just over 6 pounds at birth, and was named Gerardo after her doctor. Gerardo was raised believing that Medina was his sister, but found out at the age of 10 that she was, in fact, his mother. Medina has never revealed the father of the child, nor the circumstances of her impregnation. Esquivel suggested she might not actually know herself by writing that Medina couldn't give precise responses. Although Lina's father was arrested on suspicion of child sexual abuse, he was later released due to a lack of evidence, and the biological father was never identified. Her son grew up healthy and died in 1979 at the age of 40. In young adulthood, Medina worked as a secretary in the Lima clinic of Lazada, who gave her an education and helped put her son through high school. Medina later married Raul Gerardo, who fathered her second son in 1972. As of 2002, they lived in a poor district of Lima known as Chicago's Chico. She refuses to be interviewed and turns away any reporters. Although the case was speculated as a hoax, a number of doctors over the years have verified it based on biopsies, x-rays of the fetal skeleton in utero, and photographs taken by the doctors caring for her. There are 2 published photographs documenting the case. The first was taken around the beginning of April 1939, when Medina was 7.5 months into pregnancy. Taken from Medina's left side, it shows her standing naked in front of a neutral backdrop. This is the only published photograph of Lina taken during her pregnancy. The other photograph is of far greater clarity and was taken a year later in Lima when Gerardo was 11 months old. In 1955, except for the effects of precocious puberty, there was no explanation of how a 5-year-old girl could conceive a child. Extreme precocious pregnancy in a child aged 5 or under has only been documented with Medina. So there you have it, guys, the 5-year-old mum. Very strange indeed. I, again, don't know what to think about this one. It's very strange. A 5-year-old mum, I mean, I'm just thinking, like, imagining if that was your daughter and trying to explain that to anybody. Again, it's very suspicious that she was unable to tell anybody the story behind her pregnancy, who the father was. Was it the dad? I don't know. I don't want to say it was the dad, especially considering he was suspected and then was let off. But that could be just because, like I said, there wasn't enough evidence. Doesn't mean he didn't do it, and would probably be the most likely explanation for this story. But what do you guys think? Head over to planetinside.co.uk and let me know. Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for this week. I hope you guys have enjoyed this week's episode, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Have a good one.
Back, now I'm back at it. I know I rap hard, I'm a rap addict. And I will wait to find if this will last forever. And I will pay no mind when it won't, cause it can't. It just can't. It's not supposed to. Yeah, I just woke up, went to work, got paid, and rolled up some more trees, got laid. Got a 4-0 with a kush, just top grade. Rolling up them kinks, coughing on a spade. So make a toast for the good life. And if it's been a good day, then it's gonna be a good night. Space cruising in the whip, what a good night. Never go to sleep, so I'm never hearing good night. Matter of fact, good morning, how you doing? Purple so sticky, you'd have thought I put glue in. Should've been a valedictorian, cause I'm the top student. Rapping all day, which I'll never stop doing. On till I drop off, no roof. Take the top off like a shook bottle of champagne, I'm about to pop off. I go in, I do it, I did it, yeah, I done it. Jogging my memory through the city while I run it. And I will wait to find if this will last forever. And I will pay no mind when it won't, cause it can't. It just can't. It's not supposed to. Bother